And Nick, thanks for hosting. So my journey here to University Health System took about 25 years to get here. And I have been involved in asset management the whole time. And most of that time, I didn't even know it. My background is in accounting and finance. I have a master's degree. And I learned more in my first year on the job as a staff accountant than I did in all my years in college. And so one of the tasks that were assigned to entry-level staff accountants like myself was to do the raw materials and inventory for the company I was working for. And so that's how I got introduced to inventory and working with, the first in, first out method of, and calculating the usage of for monthly expenses. I also learned in accounting that one of the quickest ways to advance is, unfortunately, just move from company to company. So on my career path, in the next company I went to, I had some of the same duties, but it was sort of a promotion. So I got introduced into some new concepts, and one of those was leases. And so I understood first of all, going back to my time doing raw materials inventory, I found that I enjoyed it. I like to do that kind of work, more hands-on than behind the computer. So then moving forward, I got into a senior accounting position and got introduced to leases. And one of the events that occurred got me even thinking further about asset management. And so what happened there was we had copier leases. And back in those days, this was before the cloud and before copiers can report their own activities.
Back in the dark ages, yeah.
Yeah, there used to be these little counters like odometers inside the copy machines. And so every month I would have to go to all the copiers and record the odometer reading. And that's partly how we were billed, by the number of copies as well as the kind of machine it was. And so I had a department contact me and asked me to get them a new copier, one like Department A had, which was like a really nice industrial copy machine. And so before just contacting the copy company and getting them, I just did some analysis on the machines and what they were rated for. And so the copy machine that they wanted, this industrial commercial grade copy machine, was rated to do like 100,000 copies a month. And the machine that this department had was only rated at like 10,000 copies a month. And so I started looking at those numbers that I was gathering month after month on the odometer. And it turned out that the department that had the smaller unit that wanted a bigger unit was producing like 50,000 copies a month, and the machine was only rated at 10. So it sort of, I understood why they wanted a better machine. But then when I looked at the industrial machine, and I noticed that they were only producing like 5,000 copies a month. So they were over machined. And so rather than contacting a leasing company and getting another big machine, I simply had them swap machines. And so everybody was happy. So that was kind of like another episode in my journey to asset management. And so I moved on again to another organization, getting a promotion along the way. And so I might add too that during my interviews, as I was going from company to company, essentially promoting myself, I noticed that there was a big interest in reconciling the physical assets of the organization to what was being reported on their fixed asset register, because that just wasn't being done historically at these organizations that I was interviewing at. And so I just kind of kept that in the back of my mind. I didn't really think too much about it. But I moved on, and then the next company I went to, and I was living in Florida at the time. So I got another introduction into asset management when a couple of hurricanes came across, like 2 in 1 year. And so I got to work with insurance adjusters, and I got to submit claims on behalf of the company. And then that's when it kind of started, I started kind of understanding really the importance of why these companies want their physical assets to match the register, because that's the first thing an adjuster asks for, is that fixed asset register when you have a claim. So this was back in the Y2K days, and then so I decided to make a run at it on my own, trying to help companies, and I started a firm that did that kind of work, reconciling physical assets to their fixed asset register, and it went pretty well for about 4 years. I got some clients, local clients to national to international clients, did a lot of traveling, and it was really rewarding knowing that I was helping them. But at some point, it dawned on me too that there were not processes in place to help them sustain and maintain all this work that I did for them. And so it was a little troubling to me in some sense, that they were spending all this money doing a physical inventory, reconciliation, setting up their database and all of that, and then they had no process to maintain it. And then lo and behold, one of my clients offered me a position that I could not refuse, so to speak. So I took on a role in an accounting supervisor position at one of my client companies. And I got introduced there, again, along my asset management journey, to more of the external auditors and preparing work papers and things like that, and what they look for. And then I became an accounting manager eventually with another organization where I was involved with the entire accounting process, including the budget process. So I kind of was introduced to the budget process, which has an effect on the planning of assets and whatnot. Then I got into my previous job where I was also a fixed asset accounting manager, and it was a utility industry which was heavy capitalized. And so I started doing some research then, and this was like in, I guess, 2008, into asset management, and discovered that asset management can mean a lot of things to different people, anywhere from managing stock portfolios to real estate. It's just a really broad term. And I ran into the draft at the time of the ISO 55000 standard. And I thought that was very interesting. And I followed it through the drafts. And then during that time, again, I was hired on here at the University Health System, where during my interviews, which were multiple, I talked about the ISO standard and even though it wasn't published yet, and just all the benefits that it could bring, because they were telling me all the issues that they were having with property management. And of course, I told them I could solve all their problems. And
Of
so,
course.
yeah, of course. And so they hired me, and maybe this was September 2013, and then shortly thereafter, the standard was published. But I had the draft, and I had already started before it was published, and I knew that that was the direction I wanted to go. That I wanted to become the world's first certified hospital. I actually wanted to try to be the world's first ISO certified entity. But I had gotten to work on it. I had a very limited staff and very limited resources. When I got to the health system, the asset management department literally was just two guys that waited for the phone to ring. And that was the entire department. And so I had a lot of work to do ahead of me, and started on that. And so eventually the standard was published. I had a bit of a head start, but even with that head start, I had a whole lot more to do when I ordered a gap assessment. And so I had really no guide in putting a SAMP together, because there were just, no one had done it before for personal property or a hospital. So that took quite a bit of time with the assessor going back and forth, just really understanding what a SAMP is. I never heard of a SAMP before, let alone seen an example of it. So after, I think it took me about 7 tries before they were satisfied that I had a legitimate SAMP put together. And so we scheduled the actual audit, and the rest of it, well, let me take a little bit of a step back, and that is I had to convince my senior leadership that this was a good thing in terms of going through the entire process and having the audit done. And I found during my conversations over the years, like I hope you can tell, but I get pretty passionate about asset management. I just really enjoy it. And so when I was talking to other department heads or other leadership roles, I think I sort of overwhelmed them in my desire to comply with the standard, because I found most people are just, they have their own worlds and wheelhouses that they operate in. And it's not that they don't care, but they don't care as much as I did about, my world. And so it kind of registered after a while. You can tell when people they're just not interested anymore, because I could talk about this subject for a long time. And so, they say that, that luck is a combination of preparation and timing, I think. And if not, then I'll coin that here today. But anyway, I had an opportunity to talk with our deputy CFO, because I had been trying to convince my boss at the time that we should do this certification process, and he was nearing retirement. As a matter of fact, he's retired now, and I think he just wanted to go out quietly. And so yeah, I talked to him about it, and he was interested in it, but again, not as interested as I was. And then so I finally convinced him. When he announced his retirement, I convinced him that this is a way for him to go out on top, to becoming the world's first ISO certified hospital. And so we had a we ran into our deputy CFO in the hallway, and my boss at the time said, hey, I think we could pitch this now and see what he says, the deputy CFO. And so with all my experiences of talking too much about it, I already had developed sort of that elevator pitch. And so I approached them that way. I don't remember exactly what I said. It was basically, you know, I want to implement a system so that we can validate all of our assets, not just as they come in, but well into the future. And so that kind of, he was interested in, and he asked a couple of questions, and I just told him about the certification process and that it would be audited externally, again, keeping it in very simple terms. And his response was something to the effect of, you know, that it sounds like we don't have anything to lose by doing it. Because I had already researched how much it was going to cost and all of that, and that was one of the questions. And so he said, we don't have anything to lose. Let's go ahead and do it. And so that was, you know, that was the green flag to go ahead, and I just took off from there and started.
Were you able to talk about? You talked about the cost, but were you able to project, you know, benefits in dollars, or was cost the only issue there?
Not at that time, because I had no metric, but I was able to sort of convey that there are some the benefits. Again, at a high level, I learned not to talk too much about it. It was just a high level, you know, hey, we can save money by reutilizing stuff. We can become a more efficient organization by having all information flow through this department. Just very high level bullet points, and that was enough to really convince them that it was worth a shot, because the money to become certified, to not just become certified, but to ensure that our processes were good. It was a good thing.
Yeah.
It was well worth.
Yeah. So what's kind of the scope of the hospital system there? Like, how many people, or how many buildings, or how much stuff, or how many people get an idea of how big of a bite you were taking there?
So we have on the main campus, so we're a health system, okay? Some people call them hospital districts. We have a main hospital. We have what we call outpatient clinics throughout the Bexar County, as well as a business center, a call center, a technical center. So we have approximately, I would say, close to 40 individual sites spread across 1,200 square miles of Bexar County in San Antonio. Yeah. The hospital campus has 3 towers, 2 12-story towers and 1 10-story tower. So we have we're licensed for over 1,000 beds. It's a trauma 1 level hospital.
Yeah. Were there any, when, you know, and it's been a while since your system's been in place and approved and certified, has there been any surprising benefits or anything that you weren't anticipating that has proven to be a plus from doing it?
I think really one of the biggest benefits that I've seen was just the level of communication between departments. I remember when I came here, departments were very siloed and just interested in staying in their lanes. Yeah. And so by communicating the benefits of what I was trying to do and emphasizing how much help that they would be in achieving these goals, the level of cooperation increased and the silo walls started to decrease.
Sounds like a good thing. Well, listen,
Yep.
we could obviously talk a long time about your system, but people will have a
Yep.
chance to hear some more about that, right? At our ALN, fall forum coming up, and I know you're involved in that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be involved in there?
Sure. So I'm working with one of our internal auditors here, as well as Ed Safdie, who is, I would say, an expert in facilities asset management, as well as Tia. Her last name is escaping me at the moment.
Maragos.
There you go. So we are teaming up to put a presentation together on what it takes to really support an asset management system, because we felt that the ISO 55000 is defined. Anybody can read it. Anybody can follow and comply with it. But there's things that aren't in there that I felt were necessary to convey to help support that effort and to maintain certification. So our presentation is, we're going to talk about ISO 55000, but primarily we're going to talk about how to support it, and so that it's continuous improvement and sustained. And then Ed's going to talk about the facility part of it, which we are just now, as a matter of fact, getting into here at University Hospital. Our facilities department has approached us and asking them for some help. So that's going to be, that's a benefit, and it's going to be an entirely new experience for me, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. We're coming up on our audit. We've expanded our scope of our certification. Initially, we began with just the process of asset acquisitions and asset disposals, because I felt it was important to, if you look at the hospital as a house, we wanted to secure that front door and that back door. And then my approach was to take care of the movement and the utilization and then things, within the facility later. So our scope, certification scope, was on our processes and in making sure our asset acquisitions and our asset disposals were good. And so we've expanded that scope now to include all the remaining life cycles phases as we've defined it, in terms of the storage of it, the inventory of it, as well as the return and exchange process. And so we've expanded our scope, and that audit is coming up in November. We'll have to define recently, but I do have 4 articles in 3 different trade publications, and I have done 3 presentations. So my articles, I have 2 in the Property Professional published by the NPMA. I have one it's called ITAC, which is published by the International Association of IT Asset Managers. And I have a publication in CIO Application magazine.
Very cool.
Yeah, nice. Good connections. Yeah.
Someone specifically asked if you'd written a book.
I have, but it's not yet published. I hope to have it published by the end of the year, or first quarter next year at the latest.
Great. Well, in the last minute or 2 here, you want to tell us anything about that book?
So the book is basically my journey in putting together the life cycle processes in having a complete and functioning asset management system for personal property. It goes through each of those life cycle phases and the processes, and it touches on the procedures on how to go from start to end on each one of those life cycles.